It's time to talk about Dressrosa. This is serious. It's my favorite arc. Hello everyone, it's Laffy Chaffy. Alright, yeah, I'm not gonna be able to wear that the whole time, but we're here to talk about Dressrosa because, you know, as a lot of you might have seen, and if you haven't, go check it out, Grand Line Review did a review, a big documentary of all of his fans' thoughts of Dressrosa. I really liked the idea, and I even submitted my own video, but it didn't make it in, but that's okay. You know, I'm sure there was plenty of submissions there. But whether I was going to be included or not, I was planning on, once his video was out, making my own video for my responses to the question and just, you know, opening up the topic of Dressrosa because, unpopular opinion alert, I love Dressrosa. And I never really understood why there was so much negativity surrounding it. Like, yeah, the Rebecca and the pacing, but it wasn't much worse than any other arc, in my opinion. The Rebecca Flashback is its own entity, yet Dressrosa still stands as one of the best arcs, in my opinion. Now, disclaimer, I experienced Dressrosa only anime. I have yet to read the manga of Dressrosa, and I know that it's kind of drawn out in the manga as well, but I know for sure that the anime definitely drew it out much, much longer, as, again, Grand Line Review discusses about, I think it was like 0.8 chapters per episode, which is insane, blew my mind. Again, check out his video because there's a lot of stuff that I even learned, and I love Dressrosa. I've watched it several times. Since I first experienced One Piece anime only up until about Whole Cake Island, I'm reading the manga. If you can see, I'm on like Skypiea, so I have yet to get to Dressrosa or anywhere near Dressrosa at this point, so all my opinions here are based on the anime and a completely biased opinion with Law and Doflamingo, and yeah, that's about it. We're gonna structure this video in order of the questions. There will be snippets of my responses for my original submission, but overall I want to go a little bit more in depth here, because I feel like with Dressrosa on the mind, and not knowing that his video was going to be released soon, I started rewatching Dressrosa again because it came out in the dubbed a few months ago and it's still being dubbed. Hashtag subbed over dubbed, to be clear, but I just like every version of One Piece, so I restarted the arc. Again, this was a very Dressrosa-centric week for me, so I wanted to make my own video and include my submission to his video and just talk about Dressrosa and see if there's anyone else that also shares my opinion that Dressrosa is amazing. I know there was a lot of people who said that it was amazing and it was the best arc, so shout out to all of you who defended Dressrosa, but we're gonna be here and just talk about my perspective and my opinions of it, and then I want to hear from all you guys, what you share, what you disagree. So going into Dressrosa, I had a lot of hype because Law and Doflamingo, however, Law and Doflamingo were two of my favorite characters leading up to the arc, so I definitely had high hopes. Were two of my favorite characters up to this point, and I was so excited to see how Doflamingo was going to be incorporated in this, because just seeing him in Marineford and prior to Marineford, he was shown to be such a confident, charismatic, psychotic person who can manipulate others with his strings. So I was definitely curious as to how they were going to beat that. He was overpowered as shit. Of course, we had just met Law, who at Punk Hazard was a badass, loved him on Sabo, he saved Luffy. Already, you know, I wasn't quite obsessed with him back then, but Dressrosa is what did it, let me tell ya. So if nothing else, blame Dressrosa for this. I also wasn't that big of a fan of Fishman Island, so the introduction of Punk Hazard, which I liked Punk Hazard, especially when Law came in. Again, did I mention that these opinions were gonna be biased? Because they're totally biased. I've rewatched Punk Hazard like twice. This is my third time. It's a sickness, really. But once we got into Dressrosa, I was really enjoying it. I thought my biggest complaint with the pacing and everything was definitely the parts with the Colosseum, but it just seemed very drawn out. The Colosseum fights dragged on a little bit, and especially towards the middle where Luffy and Law were just running across Dressrosa trying to catch up to Doflamingo after the first encounter. That was a lot. It was just drawn out so much. I mean, I love Bartolomeo. Also, one of my favorite plot twists of Dressrosa, you know, subtle, small on the side, but it was so great, was that Bartolomeo was actually a fanboy of Luffy. I thought that was hilarious, because I was totally convinced that he, like Cabbage, were out for Luffy's head, you know, that they had some grudge against him, and I was interested in finding out what that was, but no, Barty was just a fanboy. We can all relate to that. But I felt like the Colosseum fights were way drawn out. And then the part where Zoro is running around with a little Tontada, he's chasing his sword for so many episodes. But honestly, I didn't feel like the introduction of the Colosseum or leading up to the Colosseum was poorly paced at all, with the introduction of Fujitora, and then Law, Robin, Usopp, and Caesar all going to Greenbit. I thought that was really well paced, and everything that happens on Greenbit was one of the better parts of the arc for me as well, because that's where Fujitora and Doflamingo and Law clash, as well as Usopp and Robin get captured by the Tontadas, which that introduced that whole thing, these mystical fairies. It was balanced, is what I'm trying to say. Like, for part of the episode, you're watching Zoro run around in circles, and that's like, oh, kind of boring. But then the other part of the episode, you're getting Law, Robin, Caesar, Caesar going across the bridge about how he has to protect them from the fighting fish. The gas beam as he's flipping out because Law has his heart is great. I love Caesar so much. I feel like him and Gangster Gastino would get along really well. They're very similar, you know, they have the similar aesthetic. I wonder where Gangster Gastino and Caesar are right now. I hope they meet someday. And with the introduction of the Tontadas and the Colosseum, there were plenty and plenty of characters to be incorporated into this arc, but I think Dressrosa stood out as one of my favorite arcs because there were so many characters, so many differing factions coming together to defeat Doflamingo. And then later on, when a lot of them banded together for the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, it just felt right to me. It made sense. I mean, we had the Straw Hats, we had Law, we had Cavendish and Bartolomeo and the other Colosseum fighters, we had the Don Quixote pirates, we had the royal family, we had the revolutionaries and the Marines, and the samurai, and even Jesus Burgess was representing the Blackbeard pirates. That's 9. That is 9 different factions all coming together in this arc, which I loved. I loved having so many people and seeing the different perspectives of Dressrosa and Doflamingo. You have, you know, the Don Quixote family about their rise to power and how they're controlling everyone, where Doflamingo is very comfortable on his throne. We have the Marines, who were called in by Law. I didn't pick that up at first, that Law was the one who brought Fujitora to Dressrosa, which is insane planning on his part. And, you know, if Doflamingo didn't have the Celestial Dragons behind his back, would have been a badass plan to get Doflamingo out of the Warlords and then have an admiral show up to take him to jail because now he's a pirate. Unfortunately, that backfired. Doflamingo gave him the Uno reverse card, and now Law was the one who was kicked out of the Warlords and sought out for arrest by Fujitora. So it didn't quite work out, but to be fair, how could Law foresee that Doflamingo was a Celestial Dragon? Like, come on. That was also one of the most insane backstories and reveals of the entire arc, because it just made so much sense for why Doflamingo was the way he was and everything. Oh man. But yeah, we get those perspectives, and we get the Tontadas, we get to see how, I mean, if any group of characters could have been removed from Dressrosa, I would have to say that the Tontadas are that group, because they don't really serve a purpose. I get that they're the magical gardeners of the smiles, and so they had to be there, but we could have done some other group of people on Dressrosa that were good at gardening, and they were just humans that they enslaved. But it was good to see that there was a rebellion brewing underneath the Dressrosa against Doflamingo that was unrelated to the Straw Hat. It was a little convenient that the whole battle was happening that same day, so that was a little weird, but And then we get the Colosseum fighters, where I think that was very realistic that if the Flame fruit was up for grabs, so many people would want to get it. Although maybe I missed something, but I always thought that that was a weird plot hole that everyone else knew that the flame fruit was up for grabs and was the prize, but yet Luffy didn't know, and like none of the Straw Hats, because I get Luffy doesn't read the paper. Though I guess the news got out more from the underground communication from Joker. So I guess all those kingdoms and people had something to do with the underground, and that's how they found out. I guess that makes sense. Anyway, I really liked that there were tons of people out for the flame fruit, and then they all gathered together through the Grand Line. And then finally we get the revolutionaries, which that makes also a ton of sense. Coincidence that they're in there the same time as everything else. It's a single day. But it makes a lot of sense that they were inspecting Doflamingo's underground brokerage and shady dealings with weapons to other countries and stuff like that. So that made a lot of sense, and that also made it feel real that Doflamingo has a lot of enemies. He has a lot of allies, and he's on a pedestal to both the underground world and the above ground world with the celestial dragons and king of Dressrosa. But there are a lot of factions gathering together that do not like him and do not want him on his current throne. So I thought that was pretty realistic, and because he was so corrupt, and although he was sneaky, I like that the Revolutionary Army was able to like outsmart him in a sense, where they were able to investigate and dive into all of his illegal doings. Remember when I said that the Tentata were the only group that I would be willing to get rid of for this arc? I take that back. Bellamy, get him out of this arc. I saw the chance for redeemability in him in the beginning because he went to Sky Island, which was really, really cool. Really good character development there. But he was still following Doflamingo, and then when he was fighting Luffy and Doflamingo released the strings on him and he continued to fight, getting in the way, I just lost all respect for him as a character. I'm glad he's just off making flags somewhere. I hate Bellamy almost as much as I hate Rebecca. I said it. He just bowed down to Doflamingo no matter what Doflamingo did to knock him down, treat him like shit. Fighting Luffy in the grand battle, he still, even after released from his strings, had to hold on to his conviction because a man can't just get rid of his dreams and his idols when it's convenient. Yeah, okay, but you were wrong. That's just you being stubborn. And he fights Luffy and he distracts Luffy, and then Law has to 2v1 the most powerful people on the island, gets shit on, and then Luffy's like, I'll never punch a friend. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Bellamy, I hate him. Almost lost my cool there. Let's talk about a better character, Rebecca. And by better, I mean also awful, because I hate her too. If we saw it 20 times, we saw it 19 too many times. That's how many times we saw her. It's what made me not like Rebecca in the arc at all, because we just kept seeing her, and it dragged down the story so much but added nothing to it. I mean, I really like her character now that she's part of the Reverie and everything, but she was just in the way. I like her now that she's not in the story. Now that she's part of the Reverie and she's more of like the princess going to be bringing in the dawn with one of the allied kingdoms like Vivi and Shirahoshi. I like that. I didn't really like Vivi at first. You know, she was basically the same character as Rebecca. You were introduced to a badass woman character who had to fight through their suffering and do all this stuff. Viola as well, but I actually do really like Viola. I like Viola. But yeah, we're introduced to Rebecca as being a hard ass at first. I was like, oh shit, she's naked, but she seems really good at fighting. This is really interesting that she had to put up with all this mental, emotional torture growing up. But then she just became useless and cried a lot and didn't do anything. I really liked Kyros as a character, as a father figure, and everything that he stood for, so I think she should have still been in the arc. Just a lot less often, especially with those godforsaken flashbacks. So many flashbacks. Yeah, every time I came across a Rebecca flashback, zip through it, keep it coming, keep it going, fast forward through the whole episode if you have to. Oh boy. Anyway, unlike the Rebecca flashbacks, I'm not going to linger on this issue any longer than necessary. So moving on to the location and everything, I loved Dressrosa as an island. If you take away Doflamingo's influence of the toys and the corruption and the death, and just looked at the country itself, it seemed like a really happy place, full of life and passion. And I think that really made it stand out as an arc as well, similar to Alabasta, where you could feel like it was a real place, full of its own history and culture. Grand Line Review did bring up some good points, that it was a very stagnant presentation of the island, where it was, it was always daytime in a very static environment, and it does kind of get old, but I really liked the idea that it was taken from Spain, and it was given a little bit more of a fantasy thing about it, and then the toys, I thought that was really interesting. I loved the dynamic between the toys and the humans, and how that all ended up being a very, very dark side of the island, and of course was linked to Doflamingo. I thought it gave the island a lot of flavor, honestly. And the worst part of the arc, I don't even remember what I said in my original submission, but it was probably Bellamy. Anime issues aside though, I think the worst part of the arc is probably Rebecca. Another is definitely Bellamy. Those are two characters that I wish weren't in there. Specifically the Bellamy versus Luffy fight, because it was so dumb. But I already talked about my feelings about that and why, and it was just so stupid. Bellamy had a chance, because the fact that he went to Sky Island and that he was changed, all of that was fine. It wasn't until the final battle that he was being used against Luffy and then was released but was still fighting. That totally ruined his character. I'm glad he's off making flags now for the Grand Fleet, but I did not like him. And then the other worst part of the arc was probably just, Rebecca. Probably Rebecca. Everything that had to do with Rebecca. And it sucks because Kyros was such a good character. Really, Kyros should have been like the center of attention for Dressrosa, and he kinda was, because he initiated a lot of the rebellion as a toy soldier and everything, but Rebecca should have, I guess what I want more is Rebecca just to be in the background. She could have been a Coliseum fighter and everything, but then we focus on Kyros. Give Kyros the backstory that he needs, which is Rebecca's backstory, but it's centered on Kyros. Talk about the daughter that he tried to protect with his life and tried to teach her how to fight, but she was too kind. All of that's great, and that adds to Kyros' character. But then stay on Kyros, Rebecca was just, it was too much. It was too much, and Kyros was too great a character to be ruined by Rebecca. And then you could have the happy hug at the end, everything's happy. We could have just not had Rebecca. Now, I'm gonna move on to my favorite characters in the arc. Because, Law's one, and, Doflamingo was also one. Yes, in case you were wondering, I was going to cosplay Doflamingo, so I have a blanket that will someday be Doflamingo. My friend has Corazons. We cosplayed as Law and Corazon. And then Luffy, of course, is always my favorite character in the arc because I love Luffy. But then we also get Sabo. Oh boy, unfortunately, I was spoiled on Sabo's existence and really when he was going to be even introduced, because after we got Luffy's flashback over with, I had Googled Sabo for some reason just to know something, and bam! It was Luffy and Sabo reuniting at the Coliseum, and Luffy was in his gear. So as soon as I was seeing the Dressrosa outfits, I was like, oh no, it's gonna be Sabo soon! So I was anticipating Sabo's reveal very much. Ever since Luffy puts on that helmet, I was like, is that Sabo? Is that Sabo? And then we see his feet. That's Sabo. That's totally Sabo. So, but even with being spoiled, I still loved Sabo's reveal, and it is just a happy ending but still such a sad ending for Luffy, because I don't want Luffy to have been alone. I know sad backstories and everything. A lot of the Straw Hats have way worse stories than Luffy, but I just needed in my soul for Sabo to be that source of happiness. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is that Sabo is, but it is. I think if anything, Sabo's existence makes Ace's death hit so much harder too, because then, you know, when he's dying, he's like, oh, Sabo, if only Sabo were here. And Ace never knew that Sabo was alive. That breaks my heart. But anyway, and then we get Best Girl Koala in this arc, which I love Koala, especially with her whole thing with the Fishman Island and everything. And then last, but certainly not least, is the introduction of Corazon. If Law wasn't one of, if not my favorite character in One Piece, his backstory brought him to my favorite character in One Piece, because oh my god, aside from like Brook and then on par with Robin, greatest, worst backstory in the entire show. It gave not only Law a lot of depth and a lot of, well, background, but it also really solidified that connection between him and Doflamingo, and that was Corazon. Because going into the arc, you're wondering, like, why does Law know Doflamingo? Doflamingo said that Law used to work for him. There's clearly something here. What is it? And then we get his backstory, and we meet Corazon and Law's interactions with the Don Quixote family. I absolutely loved the whole psychological dive between Corazon and Doflamingo. The way that you saw what they went through, side by side, and yet they turned out so differently because of how they coped with it. It just reinforces how crazy Doflamingo always was, and how his need for power and control consumed him. Oh my god, it makes interesting interactions amazing interactions. So the entire Doflamingo and Law fight, holy crap, with the knowledge that you have, because I think you get Law's backstory kind of in the middle of the fight. And so once you come out of the flashback and you continue with Law versus Doflamingo, oh my god. And then the part where Corazon's standing next to him, and then the part where Corazon's standing next to him. Oh my god. It is the best character development, in my opinion. Is you get everything with Doflamingo, everything with Roshinate, and everything with Law. And then you see how all of them connect to get to where we are today, and every reason that Law has to take down Doflamingo. Which, I'll also say that Law totally should have gotten the last hit on Doflamingo. I understand that Luffy has to, but I'm sorry, that Gamma Knife, bye-bye. No. No. You're not stitching up anything! I feel like I need to make videos on all these characters in of themselves, because I have such an interest in all of them, their backstories, oh my god, everything that there is to do with all these characters, especially Sabo and the revolutionaries. I think they added a lot to the series, and then that Sabo got the flame fruit. Ooh, that was pretty cool. And again, Rebecca ruins the scene where he's finding out that he has fire powers and he's holding Rebecca. Like, Rebecca, fuck off, man. And then bleeding over into another question, my favorite fight was Doflamingo versus Law. Law and Luffy versus Doflamingo and Treble. Well, Law and Luffy versus Doflamingo despite Treble, really. I mean, we can't have everything. But the way Law, when he was 1v1ing Doflamingo, the amount of emotion packed behind the decade of pain and hatred, and then when he and Luffy were using combo attacks against Doflamingo, it was amazing. It is still my favorite fight, possibly, ever. I thought that dynamic was really cool. The Red Hawk, almost best part of the entire arc was when he shambles and the Red Hawk, ooh. They totally would have won quicker if Law and Luffy were able to fight together against both of them, but, you know, we needed some Law time for him to lose. But to be fair, it was a 2v1 and that was pretty rigged. But everything up to that point with the 5 of them, minus Bellamy, 4 of them, the 4 main fighters, I think that was a really awesome dynamic until, you know, Luffy got pushed aside and then Law was versus the 2 of them, but still that is my favorite fight with Law and Doflamingo. Just because the backstory. So especially rewatching the arc with Law's backstory already known, it makes it feel real. Is that a describing word? Real? It's real. Doflamingo just had it all. Had, because the mofo's down at Impel Down now reading some newspapers, which, God, even that. Doflamingo can read a newspaper, and we shit our pants about it. That tells you that this villain is nothing to sneeze at and is amazing. Doflamingo is my favorite villain to this day. He's tied pretty close with Katakuri, but I don't consider Katakuri a villain necessarily. But yeah, Doflamingo leading up to Dressrosa was depicted as such a crazy, powerful, charismatic person that I loved how the whole Dressrosa arc revolved around his sick and twisted mentality. They just kept digging into Dressrosa's history and seeing more and more supporting evidence that Doflamingo is screwed up. He's amazing. I love him. Because Doflamingo, I think what makes him, at least in my opinion, one of the best villains of the entire series is his charisma. Because we have Blackbeard, we have Akainu, we have Eam. All of them are just kind of evil, and they're just evil. Like Blackbeard, we don't know much about Eam, but like Akainu, he doesn't have charisma, he doesn't have any flavor to his character. He's just unrelenting justice, and you know, you just kind of hate him for it. Blackbeard, he wants to, you know, there's a lot of flavor to his character, but not in quite the same way that Doflamingo is. And you know, I'm sure once we get a lot more information and more interactions with Blackbeard, maybe I'll change my mind, but Doflamingo is just so confident, so cocky. No matter what, he is smiling his ass off because the entire situation is just hilarious to him. Even when he's down, he's just smiling and cackling. I love it so much because he does bad so well. And he is evil too. Like, that adjective does not fall short on Doflamingo. He kills his own father. Even as a kid, he was pretty effed up. So the addition of his backstory gave a lot of rounding out to his character. You can't say that Doflamingo was misunderstood. We understand where he went and how he got there. And that's just the way he is. The nature versus nurture of Doflamingo versus Corazon. Have I talked enough about Doflamingo and Corazon now? I think I have. So maybe we should just move on because I could again make an entire video on the 2 of them, on each of them separately. Oh man. Gear 4th. We're going to talk about Gear 4th. I thought it was the stupidest thing. So dumb. It was definitely not what I was expecting, and I feel like a lot of people probably think the same thing. Even Doflamingo was laughing at it, which I thought was hilarious. I can relate to Doflamingo's reaction when Luffy is just this balloon looking ass and he's bouncing and he can't stop bouncing. I thought it was really dumb and I did not like the design. But when he launched forward and smashed Doflamingo across the city, it hit hard. Pun intended. No, I mean, looking back, I actually really like it now, and I think it's a really cool form, and especially his transformation animation is really cool with the, how this swirled in, the patterns of his devil fruit. It was solid. We were first introduced to Gear 4th. It was really dumb looking. But then we got to see it in action and we were like, holy shit, this is overpowered. The way he was zooming everywhere and that he could extend his arms in that weird way with the, ooh, and he was taking down Doflamingo too. He was crushing it. If it wasn't for the time limit, it would have taken 2 Gear 4th forms to take down Doflamingo. But also just kudos to Doflamingo for being able to tank all that because the dude's a monster. I'd have to say that Gear 4th is one of my favorite parts of the arc, but hands down, the best moment in the entire Dressrosa arc is Law's backstory. It introduced Corazon, And it just gave so much history and context to him and Doflamingo's past. It's tragic in every sense of the word, and it makes the defeat of Doflamingo as Luffy punches him into the ground so much more impactful as Law watches on. You learn so much about Doflamingo, Rocinante, and Law, and their connection just becomes intertwined at that point, and you understand a lot of what's going on in the back of the characters' heads. You can almost relate, understand, you can understand where Doflamingo's coming from. From his point of view, these people are just betraying him over and over again, and it's not his fault that he has to forgive them with their death. But yeah, it's the best part of the entire show, probably. Yeah, I'd say that's fair. And is Dressrosa one of the best arcs of One Piece? Of course, this is subjective, but yes. Dressrosa is for sure one of the best arcs in One Piece. It's tied with Marineford as my favorite arc in One Piece, of all of it. We'll see at the end of Wano how everything stacks up, because right now Wano might be like number 1. But we'll see how the entire arc wraps up and how everything settles, if it does, at the end for how Wano will stack up. But yeah, at this point, not including Wano because it's not finished yet, Dressrosa is my second favorite arc, next to Marineford. My opinion of Dressrosa has definitely changed for the better over time. While I was watching it, it definitely killed me with its pacing and Rebecca and the Colosseum dragging out, but looking back on it, the good just outweighs the bad. And I think it's one of those things where day by day, episode, chapter by chapter, again, I'm not really familiar with the manga experience, especially week to week. I can empathize with anyone who was reading Dressrosa week to week, because that's rough. That is. I understand. And I'm really excited to read the Dressrosa arc in the manga, because if I somehow liked it in the anime, I bet I will just love it even more in the manga. It's one of those arcs where once it's finished, and you think back to all the important things that happened, and just the vibes of the arc, it's just so good, and it gets better, because I was tired of a lot of things in Dressrosa, and I was like, oh my god, this is so dumb. We've been riding this bull for 10 episodes now. Can we please move on? But looking back at Dressrosa as a whole, after you experience it, I think makes it a lot better. And just thinking of it in that terms of like the arc, what was its purpose? What did we accomplish? There's a lot. Because Whole Cake Island, similar vein, where like reading week to week, and I was reading week to week for a majority of Whole Cake Island, I was getting pretty tired of it. The fight, even Katakuri versus Luffy, which is like the best fight in the entire series. God, how long did that take? I'm pretty sure it's like a 2-hour straight fight in the anime. If you just look at Luffy versus Katakuri's fight in the anime, it's like 2 or 3 hours. But then when you back away and you see Whole Cake Island as an arc, you can see everything that happened and why it happened and just appreciate it as a whole. Cake Island. And that's something I think you need to do with Dressrosa, is you can't look at the individual aspects of the arc, you just look at it as a whole, and as a whole, it was a fantastic arc. It was fantastic. I mean, unless your whole thing is like, I don't know, reviewing One Piece arcs or something, then I guess you can look at the details. But, you know, I'd like to just look at it as a great arc, and it is. I can't disagree with all the criticism, because it's true. Oh, I didn't even touch on the animation. Oh god, the animation. Pacing aside, the animation quality itself dropped so low that it was hard to watch at times. We had some interesting depictions of characters in rather unflattering scenes. Or flattering, depending on how you look at it. I.e. Viola. That did get me. Especially because they did Law so dirty. Like, what is this? And what is that? This is one of my favorite examples of the bad depictions of Doflamingo. Like, he looks like a rat. I don't know what's happening here. But yeah, we can all agree that Dressrosa was definitely lacking in animation. There was room for improvement, we'll say. Now, what I wouldn't give for like a reanimated Dressrosa video, or movie I should say, because we got it a little bit in the episode of Sabo, but the episode of Sabo stopped after Sabo got the flame fruit. So the whole Doflamingo arc, the fight, a lot of that was not focused on because that wasn't the point of the movie. The point of the movie was to show Sabo's reintroduction and focus on their backstories together, the three of them. But I would kill for an episode of Dressrosa or episode of Doflamingo. Oh shit. That would be sick. Episode of Law. If we got a good Dressrosa movie with good animation, especially with the animation that we have now in Wano, ooh boy. Megami Ishitani? Holy butthole. That would be the best movie in all of history. The most positive thing that I can say about the Dressrosa arc is that it is pivotal to One Piece. It showed that the gears from Punk Hazard that Law broke were indeed broken, and a new era is crashing through. One that Doflamingo predicted, but is unfortunately not here to see because he was the first one gone. It showed that the new generation is teaming up to make big waves and big changes in the world. And not only for the story overall, but for Luffy's own journey, it was pivotal because of the allies that he amassed during that time. It showed that he is worthy of becoming a Yonko, and that's what led him down the path later on after Whole Cake Island and now in Wano. You can really see that Dressrosa was a turning point in Luffy's journey. Now the most negative thing? I would just have to say the length of the arc. Because although the anime definitely did drag it out even longer, chapter-wise, it's a very long arc. And I feel like it could have been shortened and have just as much impact and adventure as it does now. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap up this video just by saying that Grand Line Review's video documentary was super cool, super great idea. Shout out to that. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's worth the entire hour for sure. But overall, you know, this just inspired me to make my own Dressrosa video because I love it so much and I felt the need to defend it because it's so good. Really, it's so good. And if only this hat would fit me, but yeah, that wraps it up. I have a lot more to say, but I'll wrap it up because I can talk about Law and Doflamingo and Corazon and Sabo forever. But I really want to know what all of your opinions are, so let me know if you agree that Dressrosa is the best arc in all of One Piece, objectively speaking. Or if you are not a fan, if you had to sit through it week by week, reading the manga, which I'm sure definitely sways your opinion of it. Most importantly, looking back on Dressrosa after experiencing it and after knowing everything that there is to know about the arc, what are your opinions? What are your opinions post Dressrosa? What's your favorites? What's your least favorites? That's what I'm interested in, seeing everyone's opinions. But I hope you overall enjoyed this video about Dressrosa, and if you liked anything that I had to say, or if you agreed with it, make sure you leave a like, it helps out a lot, and subscribe if you're not, because we're almost at 300, maybe this video can get me to 300. I have some cool channel art if I hit 300 that I've been working on. I wonder who it could feature. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and please share your thoughts. Until next time, have a great day, follow your dreams, and check me next time. Bye!